In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up an email assistant that drafts replies in your voice, alerts you to urgent emails, and can be continuously improved so it gets better at writing the more you use it. This has been, for me, a constant silent workhorse so far, and it's really nice when I open Gmail that I already have a jumpstart on my work. Let's start with a high-level overview of this workflow. We're going to start with analyzing the style of your existing emails that you've written yourself. Then we're going to use that style analysis to extract some writing instructions for the assistant that we're going to set up. We're then going to set up this automation that's going to run in the background in Google Workspace Studio. And finally, we will configure a feedback loop so that you can take examples back and integrate them into the writing instructions so that the drafting will get better over time. I do think it's important that we take a moment and pause to do some expectation setting, because yes, this assistant will draft emails for you. Yes, we have a feedback loop where it improves over time, but you can't expect that you're going to get to 100%, that you're going to get to the point where you just go in your inbox and just click send and send, right? You have your own knowledge, you have your own judgment that goes into every communication you make, whether it's email or voice chat or text message, whatever it is. You're always putting a little bit of your own innate knowledge into this. And there are ways to set up this automation so that it can pull from a knowledge base, and that's kind of a separate video entirely. So you can get closer if you need to pull knowledge that you have documented, but you can't expect that you won't need to do any kinds of adjustments to the drafts. What I really like about this sort of very basic email drafter is that it does just get me started. And I think it's especially useful when you have very formulaic responses. In my previous job, I was responsible for an online platform, and we got a lot of questions in that were pretty repetitive. A lot of them had to do with password reset, or they were on the wrong URL, and I was often writing some version of the same instructions. So in a case like that, an automation like this is huge, because it saves me from writing the same thing over and over, right? Then I already have a draft that's practically ready to go. But even in, for example, longer email threads, I'll have this assistant, the draft that it makes, it's very good at looking through the whole thread and maybe pulling out some context from this thread that I wouldn't have thought of, or I couldn't remember the context way back from the first email 2 weeks ago. So it does help you get started. And again, it will improve the more feedback you give it, but you can't expect that this is a kind of set and forget type of automation. This is a helping hand. This is a jumpstart. All right, expectations set. Let's dig one level deeper into this whole workflow. We have setup, one-time setup. That's the style analysis and writing instructions. Then we have the automation itself and the continuous improvement. For the setup, you can use whatever AI assistant you like. I use Claude in this example. I fed some of my favorite emails, most recent emails, good examples, into Claude, asked it to analyze my communication style, and then ask it to create writing instructions based on that. The automation itself in Google Workspace Studio is configured like this. It triggers when there's a new email that comes in. It then has Gemini make a decision. Does this email require a response? If it doesn't, it stops the automation, nothing happens. If Gemini decides, yes, this is something that needs to be responded to, it will draft a reply to the email using the writing instructions that we set up in the setup phase. Then the automation will save that draft in Gmail. There's a second question that Gemini considers, and that is this email urgent? Does it need to be responded to within the next few hours or today? If it's not urgent, it does nothing. The automation ends, and then the draft sits there until you are ready to edit and send the email. If it does think it is urgent, it will send a notification with Google Chat to let you know that you may want to log into Gmail and handle this email. Then in the continuous improvement, you initiate this part of the workflow by saving examples of what Gemini drafted versus what you ended up sending. So kind of before and after. Then again, you can go into whatever email assistant you prefer to ask it to analyze the patterns that it sees in terms of what types of edits you're making, and then update these writing instructions. And those updated writing instructions will be fed back into the automation itself, so that Gemini will then improve how it writes based on your corrections. Okay, so the first thing you want to do in this workflow is that you need to analyze your communication style so that you can make a style guide for your email assistant to use when it's writing your drafts. And kind of a little pro tip in terms of when you start using a bunch of different prompts for things. I have collected all of my prompts, all of my instructions for agents, all of my instructions for skills in one place, especially if you use them in multiple places. So I have a single source of truth. As an example here, I have the email drafter. This is an anonymous version of it. I have this folder anonymous, so there's no personal information in this one, just so I can use it for the demo. But I have a real version of this as well in my project, where I keep all the prompts that I use, and I keep the style guides themselves. In the case of this email drafter, I use this both in Google Workspace Studio, but I also use it as a Claude Code skill. So that means if I want to update it, I just go to one place here and I update it if I want to work on it and tweak it and test it. And then when I'm ready, I can push the updates out to the different places I use it. That kind of helps keep things better organized, so you know that you have the same version out everywhere you need to use it. So with that said, this is the first prompt that I used. I put it into Claude. You can put it into ChatGPT or whatever your AI assistant of choice is. And it's fairly simple. It's just asking, analyze my communication style. If you're working with connectors or integrations, it's nice if you have some kind of Gmail integration, because then it can just go in and read your most recent emails to do this. Claude has a connector to Gmail, so this was very seamless for me. And I did ask it to use an artifact if it thinks that it's helpful, and it did, and I'll show you what came out of it in Claude. What Claude created was this artifact, this kind of dashboard on my communication style. This is not necessary, but is a kind of nice way to review the report that it's made. It gives a nice overview. I apparently have a warm professional style. It clocked that I'm mostly writing in Danish, but I do also have some email communication in English too, so that's going to become relevant when we make the assistant. It breaks down some traits, some examples of how my emails express these traits. So I just spent a bit of time reviewing it. I kind of felt, you know what, this is a pretty good representation. I like it. There were a few things I thought. I have a tendency to be a bit rambly, and I always try to reduce the length of my communication as much as possible. I could have asked it here, you know what, let's say the average length should be short. But I usually find that it's nicer just to jump into testing something and then improve it iteratively than trying to make a bunch of assumptions in the beginning. So I basically just accepted this. And then comes prompt 2. Once you have your communication style laid out, the second prompt is to ask it to create the writing instructions. So I was working with Claude. I told Claude, look, I'm setting up this AI email assistant. Take this communication style, write some instructions for the assistant so that it can write using my voice. Because we're in Claude, I have a skill building skill that has, even if you're not building a skill, it has great best practices for keeping things concise so that we don't muck up the context window too much. So I asked it to use that skill and the best practices in it. I asked it to do the skill in English, but include examples in the guide for writing both in English and in Danish. So then it created this it created this style guide. And I'm not going to show you mine because there's some personal information in it, but I have an example, an anonymized example, what it wrote. So you can recognize some of the things we saw from the dashboard: warm, professional, enthusiastic, but not unprofessional. There's some tone markers, do's and don'ts. There's a lot, my emails have a lot of personalization, and it has examples. Once again, it has an example in Danish and one in English, a bit on structure. It noticed that I have specific methods for managing delays or constraints, and it has a section on emoji usage, some examples of phrases I use a lot, and then of course the language rules and a sign off. So this is actually not super long, but I think it encapsulates quite a bit of my writing style. The next step then is to head over to Google Workspace Studio to actually set up the agent that's going to use the style guide. So I'm going to hop over there. Okay, so here we are in Google Workspace Studio, and I'm going to first show you the final flow that I built, and then we'll go step by step on how to set it up. This workflow is triggered when I get an email in my Gmail inbox. And the first action it then takes is it has to make a decision. And the decision is, does this email include an action item? Is there a direct question? Is there a request for deliverable or some kind of required review or approval? Has also some examples of what to exclude, like notifications, calendar invites, newsletters, impersonal marketing emails, things like that. So that's the first thing. Does this email warrant a response? And if it does, if it returns yes, it does, then it asks Gemini. And what here is where you enter your prompt, and you have to add some variables. So I pass along who sent it, the email subject, and the body. And the prompt itself is very simple: drafting a reply to this email. And then here are instructions for tone of voice and style. And here is that tone of voice that I got from Claude when I asked it to analyze my writing style. So I just copied that right in here. And the next step, Gemini, this is being sent off to Gemini. So Gemini creates this draft. And then the next step in the series is that it drafts a reply directly in Gmail, and it just puts in the content that Gemini created in the previous step. I also added sort of an extra decision step because I have kind of like an email rule that I only check my email twice a day, at the beginning of the day and near the end of the day. And I turn off notifications and everything in between. So for the most part, that works fine. It's rare that there is an email that I get that I need to respond within an hour or within the day, but it does sometimes happen. So I just added an extra little step just in case I get an email in the middle of the day when I'm not checking emails that needs to be responded to. So I have another decision step. It's already made the draft, and then it just has to decide whether the email is high urgency or it mentions needing an answer in a short time frame. Once again, if that is true, it triggers this. It sends me a chat, and actually I do have notifications for Google Chat on. It's because I don't use Google Chat at all. So I essentially only get a chat if this triggers. So then I'll get a message with the sender's name, sent you an urgent email, and then also the subject and the body. So then I can decide whether it's something that I want to react to right away. Again, it doesn't happen all the time, but recently it actually did. The trigger did help me when someone sent me an email and said, hey, I have a meeting at 3 o'clock today. If you could please send me a response before then, that would be great. Had I not had this trigger, I wouldn't have seen that email maybe until maybe 2:50 or maybe 3 o'clock. So I probably would have missed that window. So this is actually a nice little extra step. And I can definitely recommend shutting off notifications for your email. It helps a lot to get more deep work and more focus. Okay, so let's set this up from scratch. I'm gonna go to Workspace Studio, Home, and I'm going to make a new automation. So I'm going to just title this email assistant to demo. we're going to choose as a trigger or a starter, and as you saw, it's when I get an email. You can configure specific emails. For me, it works best just all of them. And then we have to create this decide step. So we add another step, and here under AI skills, we have decide. I'm just going to paste that prompt in that I used in the other one. Here we go. Does this email include an action item for me? And remember to add the context, because just because up here it triggered because you got an email doesn't mean that this step is isolated. So it doesn't actually have any information from the previous steps unless you explicitly give it that information. So, and you do that through variables. And here we can look, okay, I have some variables available from the previous step, and I can just add the email body here. So that means Gemini is going to get this prompt plus the body of the email that came in on this step. Okay. And then the next thing we had was it's going to decide up here, and then it flows into this if the decision is true. If it's false, it just stops. It does nothing. If it's true, this has an action item, then we have to start drafting the email. So the first step we had was ask Gemini. And again, this is where I had that very simple prompt. And I'm just going to copy it in. Just like this. Draft a reply to this email, and I've copied in the core voice style guide. Once again, this step is isolated. So I'm saying this email, it has no information about this email at all. So once again, I'm going to put at the top this time, I have to add a few variables to help it. In this case, I like to include the name of the sender, because then it can, under display name, because then it can say like, hi, Mark, because it knows who's sending it. And then also the body of the email, excuse me, of course the body, but also the subject line. There it is, email subject and the body. There we go. So once again, Gemini is going to get who sent it, the subject of the email, and then what was written in the email body. And then it has this task to draft a reply, and then the style guide. So now that we've gotten Gemini to write the email for us, we then need to pass it over into Gmail. So I'm going to add another sub-step. And under Gmail, I have draft a reply. First, we need to choose which email we're replying to. And here we take from that step 1, the email ID. And in the message, we just have to add the output that Gemini gave. And we can use the shortcut here. And find for the content created by Gemini. That's the drafted wrote. And now it's going to pass that draft and create it over in Gmail. So if you just want like a core workflow for drafting emails, you can stop here. I ended up adding this extra step, so you can also do this. It involves doing another decide. So we have another decide. Once again, I'm going to copy the prompt right in here if it's expressing high urgency as variable, so it has the context it needs. In this case, I added once again the subject and the body and the name of the sender. Okay, so this is the first decision it has to make. And then we have to if it finds that this is true. So if it's true, we do have a few other options within the Google universe. That makes the most sense is, of course, that I get a notification pushed out to me in the chat. So once again, I'm going to make use of variables here because I want the chat message to give me everything I need to decide whether or not and get a reply out. So I'm going to first start with the name. So and so hasn't email. And then I also add the email in here, so I don't even have to open Gmail to figure out whether I want to re-up. And that's it. That's the whole flow. I just then have to press turn on. And then I'll show you how it works. And another thing you can do is do a test run before you turn it on if you just want to verify that it's working the way you want. So all you have to do is click test run here. And in this case, it just takes an email that you received recently. This is an event invitation I got. And you just start the test run. And you can see it working, how it works through the flow. So it's received this email. It's going to decide now whether it needs a response. And Gemini decided false. This is a promotional announcement for a workshop, so it's excluded from the need to respond. It also checked whether this was something that's very timely that I need to see, and it also responded false here. It's just an invitation to an event. It's on January 16th, so there's plenty of time. There's no urgency or nothing that needs to be answered. So that's it. It ran successfully. So now I know that it's going to work. One thing you have to remember when you do these test runs is it really will run. So if you have, now we're writing drafts. So what's the worst that could happen? We write a bad draft. If you had set this up to actually take action, it would take those actions. So you just have to be a little careful when you run test runs if you have a flow that's really going to produce something that you can't take back again. Okay, so now that we built it and we've done a test run, I want to show you how you can then monitor how it's running moving forward. You will get in this case, the drafts, they will be in your Gmail. Because if you had written a draft, it's not going to send anything. But when you open an email, it'll already have pre-populated a draft for you. Same thing with the chat, it just goes straight out to your chat. But if you wanted to see what kinds of decisions it was making, why didn't it decide to make a draft for this email, for example? You can monitor the activity log. So if I go here from the workflow itself, I can go into my flows. This is the one that we just built. So you can go in and you can modify it. But then if you go up here to the activity, here you can see, this was the test run we did. So you can see all the times it completed. You can see this is a test run, but it looks exactly the same as a regular run. You can see what email it was, what it decided, and why it decided that, and what was the result of the flow. If it decided to write a draft, it will also display the here, but of course you also have those directly in Gmail. So this is a nice way if you just want to check on what kinds of decisions it's making. Okay, there's just one last thing I want to show you, and that's how you can set up kind of a continuous improvement loop so that this assistant gets better and better over time. And the way I have set this up is I go back into my email drafter folder. I had these prompts that I used. I had the writing instructions, the ones that came out the first time. And then as I start to use the drafter and as I start to the drafts and then correct them before I send the final version, some good examples of where I have made corrections to the drafts that I would like this assistant to moving forward. And sometimes I also, that's in this before and after. So I have the AI generated draft, what it wrote, and then the final version, what I ended up sending. And in this case, what you can see, what I really did was I cut down on the fluff. This one's much more concise than the draft that it wrote. And then sometimes I also just have good examples. This one happens to come from a LinkedIn conversation, but it's like a good example of what I feel like shows my preferred communication style that I can use to improve the tone of voice prompt. And what I normally do is when I have a few good examples, I then use Claude Code I feed these examples to Cloud Code, and I use Cloud Code to improve the prompt that I showed you that is living in Google Workspace Studio with Gemini. So let me show you how I did that. Okay, so here I've got Cloud Code open, and I'll show you how I made the improvements to the prompt. This is something you can do in any AI assistant. It doesn't have to be Cloud Code. You can just upload or copy examples that you have for the drafts and the final emails and do this exact same thing in something like Chat. What I like about Cloud Code is it's very easy just to reference files that I have in my project, so I don't have to upload or copy paste. So I have directed it towards the email drafter prompt that I have saved, as well as these before and after examples, and then more examples that I thought were good to help. And then I said, help me improve the email drafter prompt. I've been using an AI assistant to automatically draft emails. In the before and after file, I have an example of a draft that it wrote and then how I ended up answering the email. And in the more examples file, I have a couple of examples, a LinkedIn exchange with a former colleague, and an outreach email I recently sent. So then I've asked it to take these examples, analyzed what I changed about the draft, see what insights you can draw from both this and the examples to improve the prompt so that the drafts will get better. So I had a look at these things. It had a kind of a summary in terms of the before and after. It had been a bit fluffy, and I just opened straight with an action. The short story here is that the AI added a bunch of extra fluff that I didn't really want, which we also saw in the fact that my response was much shorter. So, and then it also pulled some insights from the LinkedIn exchange and that email I wrote. It made some suggestions for how to change the prompt. And then it asked me if I approve what it has analyzed and if it should integrate it. And I could have some adjustments if I wanted, but I thought it all looked pretty good, so I said yes. And then it updated this file. And what ended up coming from it was this writing instructions v2. So this was the improvement. It just added a few improvements. Once again, I'm keeping all of this in one place. So I have this source of truth. I was working on a new version here. And once I was happy with it, I could then send this out, copy paste it into that Studio Workspace workflow. So replace the style guide in there with this new style guide. And then I also I can see how many, what versions I'm working with here. I also have this set up with GitHub. So I also have version control that way, I'll be able to see the different versions in my project. So that's all I did, copy pasted that over, and then already it's starting to work better. And once again, if I collect a few examples later on, then I can continue this improvement loop so that my assistant gets to know me more and more over time. And that's it. Your email assistant is ready. We have now analyzed the style of your emails, made writing instructions, set up the automation that runs this whole thing in Google Workspace Studio, and then created a continuous feedback loop. If you have questions about the workflow or you made some improvements to it, please let me know in the comments.